Here once lived a man in the United States named Elias Harper, whose life became a legend not because of wealth, power, or fame, but because of his extraordinary love for books. Elias was born in a small town in 1875. From the very first day he could read, he was enchanted by words. While other children played in the fields or ran after kites, Elias would sit under the shade of an old oak tree with a book in his tiny hands. The first story he read was about distant lands and brave heroes, and from that moment, he knew that books were his true companions. Elias's childhood was not easy. His family had little money, and the small town had just one library with dusty shelves and limited books. Yet he found a way. He borrowed books from neighbors, copied stories by hand, and traded small chores for new tales. By the time he was 10, he had read everything the town library owned, and then some. Reading became his world, his joy, and eventually his purpose. As he grew into a young man, Elias's hunger for knowledge became insatiable. He traveled from city to city, searching for libraries, bookstores, and old manuscripts. He studied history, science, poetry, philosophy, and ancient texts. He kept detailed notebooks, recording every thought, every lesson, and every insight. People thought he was eccentric. Some even called him the old bookworm in his 20s, but Elias didn't care. For him, the pages of a book were a passport to another universe. By the age of 50, Elias had amassed thousands of books in his personal library. He began teaching others about literature and history, not in schools, but in public squares, coffee houses, and community gatherings. He believed that knowledge should not be locked away, and he wanted to share every story he had ever read. His lessons were famous for their clarity and passion. People from nearby towns came to hear him speak, and soon newspapers wrote stories about the man who lived for books. But Elias's story took an extraordinary turn. Unlike any ordinary human, he never seemed to age like others. While his friends grew frail, he remained sharp and alert, almost like the wisdom in his books nourished his mind and body. Over decades, he watched generations grow and change. By the 21st century, Elias Harper had become a living library, a man who had witnessed history while absorbing every lesson books could give. Elias did not live for fame. He did not live for wealth. He lived for the stories that shaped humanity. From the rise of technology to the fall of empires, he read and reflected. He wrote letters to scholars, philosophers, and writers, asking questions that had no simple answers. Some even claimed that his understanding of history was unmatched, for he had literally spent his entire life reading, analyzing, and connecting ideas across centuries. One day, a young journalist came to interview Elias. The journalist asked, "Sir, how do you read so much, and how do you remember it all?" Elias smiled, his eyes twinkling. "I do not just read," he said. "I live the stories. Each book is a life, and I enter it fully. You cannot learn a book by skimming, it is the heart of the story that teaches you wisdom." Elias continued his daily ritual. Even at 150 years old, he still woke up before sunrise, brewed a small cup of tea, and opened a book. His eyesight had weakened, but he used magnifying glasses, and his memory remained astonishing. Visitors often said that they felt inspired and enlightened after listening to his thoughts. People called him the man who lived 150 years through books, and his life became an inspiration worldwide. Despite the unbelievable length of his life, Elias remained humble. He never claimed to have all the answers. Instead, he emphasized that every book was a teacher and every life was a lesson. He encouraged others to read not just for knowledge, but for understanding humanity, empathy, and the depth of existence. He believed that the true purpose of life was learning, growing, and sharing wisdom. When Elias finally passed away, the world mourned, but his legacy lived on. His library, filled with thousands of books spanning centuries, was converted into a public museum and reading center. Students, researchers, and curious minds traveled from all corners of the globe to walk through the aisles he once wandered. His journals, filled with reflections and insights, became treasured texts. Scholars called them a map of human thought, for Elias had spent a lifetime reading, understanding, and connecting the ideas of countless authors. Elias Harper's life reminds us that time is measured not by years, but by what we do with it. One person's dedication to learning can transcend generations, inspire countless souls, and become a beacon of knowledge. His story teaches us that books are not just ink and paper, they are vessels of wisdom, gateways to imagination, and bridges between past, present and future. In the end, Elias did not live 150 years merely by surviving. He lived 150 years by learning, understanding, and sharing the greatest gift a human being can give: knowledge. And so the man who read books for 150 years remains a legend, not just for the longevity of his life, but for the depth of his mind, the kindness of his soul, and the immeasurable impact of a life fully devoted to reading and learning.